The moment Amanda called me a charity case during her wedding speech, every head in that ballroom turned toward me. My son David's face went white. His new in-laws whispered behind their champagne glasses. And I sat there in my $30 dress, thinking about the $80 million inheritance sitting in my bank account that could buy their entire country club. Twice. But watching Amanda's perfectly rehearsed cruelty, I realized something that made my chest tighten with vindication and sadness. She had no idea what she'd just triggered. Amanda's smile never reached her eyes when she looked at me. That's when I realized Amanda had been planning this humiliation for months. If you are watching this, subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. But to understand how I knew exactly what Amanda was doing, I need to take you back 6 months earlier. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 67 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought my son David understood who I really was. I was wrong about a lot of things. My small apartment always smelled like jasmine tea and old books. The morning light streaming through my budget curtains felt honest, unlike the artificial brightness I'd encounter at David's engagement party that evening. That Thursday morning in March, David called with news that would change everything. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special. Her name is Amanda, and I think you're really going to love her." What I discovered about Amanda's background would shock David to his core. When David brought Amanda to my apartment that first evening, she arrived like a magazine photo come to life. Blonde hair that caught the light perfectly, clothes that whispered expensive, and a smile that could power the entire building. "Mrs. Chen, it's such a pleasure to meet you. David has told me so much about you." Her handshake was firm but brief, and I caught the way her eyes cataloged my second-hand furniture, my grocery store flowers, my clearly budget-conscious decorating choices. It wasn't judgmental exactly, more like inventory. But first, I needed to understand exactly how far she was willing to go. The evening felt like a performance where everyone knew their roles except me. Amanda played the charming girlfriend eager to make a good impression, and I played the modest widow, grateful to be included in my son's happiness. But I'd spent 40 years reading people, and something about Amanda's performance felt too polished. Her compliments were kind but generic. Her questions were interested but shallow. Her laughter was perfectly timed but somehow hollow. That night, as Amanda used the bathroom, she left her purse open on my coffee table. I noticed business cards scattered in the side pocket. Investment firms, estate planning lawyers, financial advisors, all with Amanda's name printed below titles like Client Relations Specialist and Wealth Management Consultant. Interesting career choices for someone David described as working in social media marketing. When I asked about her work, Amanda deflected smoothly. "Oh, that's just some freelance consulting. Nothing too exciting." After they left, I researched Amanda Whitfield online. Professional photos, thoughtful posts about success, and a lifestyle that suggested comfortable prosperity. But the expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and luxury vacations all clustered around specific time periods when she was between jobs. It was the spending pattern of someone with irregular income from sources she didn't want to explain publicly. David texted, "Mom, what did you think of Amanda? I really want your honest opinion." I stared at that message for 20 minutes. I could share my concerns and risk being dismissed as a jealous mother. Or I could wait, watch, and let Amanda reveal who she really was. "She seems lovely," I texted back. "I'm looking forward to getting to know her better." The wedding would become my battlefield. Over the following weeks, David's calls became more frequent and excited. "Amanda thinks I should redecorate my apartment." Amanda suggested we start looking at engagement rings. Each update revealed Amanda's increasing influence over David's decisions. When he called about their engagement after just 4 months, I could hear Amanda coaching him in the background. "Ask her about contributing to the wedding fund, David. Make sure she understands that family means everyone contributes what they can." The implication was clear. Amanda expected me to help pay for a wedding I hadn't been consulted about, to a woman who viewed me as a financial resource rather than a family member. That's when I made my decision. I would play the role Amanda expected, the modest widow on a fixed income who was grateful to be included. I would dress appropriately, contribute modestly, and stay in my designated place. And I would wait for Amanda to reveal exactly what she thought my place should be. The engagement party was held at Amanda's friend's house in West Hartford, one of those sprawling colonials that whispered old money. I arrived exactly on time, wearing my best dress and carrying a modest gift, prepared to play my assigned role perfectly. The first thing I noticed was how quickly conversations stopped when I approached groups of Amanda's friends. Not rudely, but with the kind of polite distance that suggested they'd been briefed about David's mother and her situation. Amanda floated through the party like she owned it, introducing me with carefully crafted phrases. "This is David's mother, Margaret. She's been so supportive during our planning process. Supportive, as if I were a helpful but peripheral figure in my own son's life." That's when I heard her whisper to David about managing expectations. I was standing near the appetizer table when I overheard Amanda talking to her maid of honor by the kitchen doorway. "I just want to make sure David's mother doesn't feel overwhelmed by all the wedding planning details. She's sweet, but this isn't really her world, you know." Her friend nodded sympathetically. "It's good that you're being thoughtful about including her appropriately. Some people from different backgrounds can get confused about their role. Different backgrounds, as if growing up middle class was a character flaw requiring careful management." The realization that this wasn't temporary wedding stress hit me like ice water in my veins. Amanda's systematic approach became clearer as the evening progressed. Every introduction positioned me as someone to be kind to rather than respected. Every conversation redirect moved attention away from my contributions toward Amanda's plans. During dinner, when conversation turned to careers, I mentioned my years managing administrative tasks for Richard's business consulting firm. Amanda immediately jumped in with helpful context. "Margaret is being modest. She was really more of an office manager, weren't you? The behind-the-scenes support that keeps everything running smoothly." Office manager, reducing 40 years of strategic business development to filing and coffee making. What I discovered next would change everything about how I saw Amanda's intentions. After dinner, I got lost in the house's hallways and found myself outside a half-open door where Amanda was talking with her mother. "The wedding budget is going to be tight, even with our contributions," Amanda was saying. "I've been hoping David's mother would offer to help more substantially, but she seems pretty limited financially." Her mother's response made my blood freeze. "Well, darling, you can't expect too much from people in her situation. At least she's not demanding to be involved in decisions she doesn't understand." I stood in that hallway, listening to them discuss my financial limitations and social inadequacies like I was a charity case they were graciously accommodating. That's when I knew I had to test her true character. The drive home gave me time to process what I'd learned. Amanda's manipulation wasn't casual or opportunistic. It was methodical, planned, and designed to achieve specific outcomes. She wanted David's complete loyalty and social status that aligned with her aspirations. My phone rang as I pulled into my apartment complex. David's name lit up the screen. "Mom, did you have a good time tonight? Amanda was so worried that you might feel out of place with her crowd." Out of place. Another perfectly chosen phrase that positioned my discomfort as a personal failing rather than deliberate exclusion. "It was lovely," I said. "Amanda's friends seem very nice. She really wants you to feel included in the wedding planning. She was thinking you might enjoy handling some of the smaller details, things that wouldn't be too stressful." Smaller details, not too stressful. Each word carefully selected to make my marginalization sound like consideration for my limitations. The wedding would become my battlefield. Over the next several weeks, Amanda's pattern became even more apparent. Every planning conversation started with my input being solicited and ended with my suggestions being gently redirected towards something more appropriate for my role. When I suggested budget-conscious flower arrangements, Amanda praised my creativity while explaining why the venue required more sophisticated options. When I offered to help with invitations, she thanked me while mentioning they'd already hired a calligrapher. Each interaction reinforced the same message. I was welcome to contribute financially, but not to influence or lead. The most telling moment came during a dress shopping trip that Amanda suggested. The bridal shop felt like a temple to wealth. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and Arctic air conditioning that raised goosebumps on my arms. As Amanda tried on gowns that cost more than most people's monthly rent, she kept up conversation about wedding details. "I'm so glad David found someone who understands that his family's happiness is what matters most. Some men get caught up in trying to please everyone instead of focusing on what's actually important." When the consultant asked about my dress, Amanda immediately offered guidance. "Margaret will need something elegant but not attention-grabbing. Navy or burgundy would be perfect. Nothing too bright that might distract from the bridal party." "Don't worry," I said calmly. "I understand the importance of knowing one's place." Amanda's smile flickered for just a moment, and I caught something sharp in her eyes before the practiced warmth returned. "Exactly. You're so understanding about these things." But in that brief flicker, I saw confirmation of my suspicions. Amanda wasn't just managing the wedding. She was establishing the permanent dynamic that would govern our family relationships for as long as David remained married to her. Driving home, I made a decision that would have shocked the old Margaret. I wasn't going to spend decades being gracefully marginalized in my own son's life. I was going to let Amanda reveal exactly who she was, and I was going to make sure David was watching when it happened. 2 weeks before the wedding, David called and asked if he could come over for dinner. "Just the two of us," he said. "I want to talk to you about something important." I spent the afternoon cooking his favorite meal, pot roast and mashed potatoes. The apartment filled with familiar smells that brought back memories of easier times, when David and I could talk about anything. When he arrived, David hugged me the way he used to before Amanda entered our lives. His familiar cologne mixed with the scent of his favorite coffee, and for a moment, the knot in my chest loosened. "Mom, I need you to know how important you are to me," he said as we sat down to eat. "I know Amanda can be particular about things, but that doesn't change the fact that you're my mother and I love you." The relief that flooded through me was so intense it made me dizzy. This was my David, the son who'd called me every week in college, who'd held my hand at Richard's funeral. I was starting to worry that the wedding planning was coming between us, I admitted. David nodded thoughtfully. "She does have strong opinions, but that's because she wants everything to be perfect. She's actually really grateful for your support. She told me how much she appreciates your understanding about letting her handle the major decisions. But I want you to know that you have a special role in the wedding," he continued. "Amanda and I talked about it, and we want you to give a blessing during the reception. Something meaningful about family and love." Amanda's mask slipped for exactly 3 seconds. A blessing. A carefully scripted moment where I could express appropriate maternal sentiment without any actual influence. It was meaningful enough to make David feel good about including me, controlled enough to ensure I didn't upset Amanda's vision. "That sounds wonderful," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, David was trying to honor our relationship within the constraints Amanda had established. For the next hour, we talked like we used to. David told me about his work, his hopes for marriage, his dreams about starting a family. I felt, for the first time in months, like his mother instead of his obligation. When he left, I stood in my doorway watching him walk to his car, feeling lighter than I had since the engagement began. Maybe Amanda's control wasn't as complete as I'd feared. Maybe I'd been wrong about the depth of Amanda's manipulation. What I overheard in the bathroom changed everything. The next day, Amanda called to invite me to lunch at her favorite bistro downtown. "A chance for some mother-daughter bonding time," she said with practiced warmth. The restaurant charged $25 for salads and $40 for entrees, designed to make everyone look wealthy and important. Amanda had reserved a corner table where we could talk privately. She looked radiant, glowing with that particular confidence brides have in the final weeks before their wedding. "Margaret, I want to thank you for being so gracious about everything," she began. "I know this process hasn't always been easy, and I really appreciate your flexibility. We talked about final wedding details, the weather forecast, her honeymoon plans." Amanda was charming and inclusive, asking my opinion on minor decisions and praising my suggestions. For 45 minutes, I almost forgot about the systematic marginalization I'd been experiencing. Then nature called, and everything changed. The bathroom door muffled most sounds, but Amanda's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. She was on her phone, apparently thinking the closed door provided enough privacy for honesty. "David's mother is exactly what you'd expect from someone who never left her small-town bubble," she was saying. "Thank God David turned out different, or this whole family integration would be impossible." The words hit my stomach like ice water. Every warm feeling from our lunch conversation curdled into something bitter and sharp. "She's harmless enough," Amanda continued, "but you can tell she's never been around real success. The way she gets intimidated by nice restaurants, how she defers to everyone. It's actually kind of sad." I stood frozen in that bathroom stall, listening to my future daughter-in-law dissect my character like a biology specimen. But David's completely on board with keeping appropriate boundaries. He understands that some people need guidance about their role in situations they're not equipped to handle. Appropriate boundaries, guidance about their role. Each phrase was a knife twist that revealed the true depth of Amanda's contempt and David's complicity. That's when I knew I had to test her true character. When I emerged from the bathroom, Amanda was back at our table, her phone tucked away, her warm smile perfectly in place. She asked if I was feeling all right, noting that I looked a bit pale. "I'm fine," I said, settling back into my chair with newfound clarity. "Just thinking about how much I'm looking forward to the wedding." And I was. For the first time since the engagement began, I was genuinely excited about the wedding day. Not because I expected to enjoy the celebration, but because I finally understood exactly what kind of test it would become. Amanda had revealed her true opinion of me, but she'd done it privately, safely, without any risk of consequences. The wedding would be different. The wedding would be public, emotional, and uncontrolled. The wedding would create conditions where Amanda's mask might slip in front of witnesses. The wedding would become my battlefield. That evening, I called David to thank him for dinner and tell him how much I was looking forward to his special day. "Amanda told me about your lunch today," he said. "She was so happy that you two are getting closer." Getting closer. Even my humiliation was being reframed as relationship progress. "She's a wonderful girl," I said. "You're very lucky." Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared for the wedding with the thoroughness of a general planning a campaign. I purchased my navy dress, appropriately modest, perfectly forgettable, exactly what Amanda expected. I practiced my blessing speech, crafting words that would sound maternal and supportive while revealing nothing about my true understanding. Most importantly, I prepared myself emotionally for what was coming. Wedding receptions were unpredictable environments where emotions ran high and careful control sometimes slipped. If Amanda was going to reveal her true character publicly, I wanted to be ready to respond in a way that would teach David everything he needed to know about the woman he'd married. The morning of David's wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect September day that wedding planners dream about. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror at 7 in the morning, looking at the navy dress I'd chosen so carefully. $30 from a discount department store. Polyester fabric that would photograph modestly. A style that whispered appropriate rather than stunning. Every detail calculated to meet Amanda's expectations perfectly. But as I fastened the simple pearl necklace Richard had given me, I felt something shift in my chest. A cold clarity that had nothing to do with nervousness and everything to do with purpose. Today, I would let Amanda reveal exactly who she was. The photographer's instructions made my blood freeze. I arrived at the country club at noon, 3 hours before the ceremony. The venue was bustling with vendors, wedding party members, and family arriving for photos. The ballroom smelled like a florist shop explosion, roses, lilies, and something cloying that made my head ache. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in golden light that should have felt warm, but somehow made every shadow deeper. The marble floors clicked ominously under my sensible heels. Amanda appeared like a vision in white silk and family pearls, surrounded by her bridesmaids who fluttered around her like devoted disciples. She looked absolutely radiant. "Margaret, you look lovely," she said, air-kissing my cheek with practiced grace. "That dress is perfect for photos. Perfect for photos." Translation: forgettable enough not to distract from the real stars. The photographer began organizing family groupings with military precision. "Okay, let's start with immediate family," he announced, gesturing for David, Amanda, and her parents to move into position. I stepped forward automatically, then stopped as he held up his hand. "Actually, let's get the bride's family first. Then we'll do some with the groom's side." The groom's side. As if I were part of a separate secondary category requiring different handling. Amanda's conversation with the caterer revealed her true plan. While the photographer worked through countless combinations of Amanda with her family and friends, I stood with other observers, watching my son pose for pictures that would document his wedding day. Pictures that, so far, included everyone except his mother. The catering manager approached Amanda during a brief break, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Whitfield, we need to finalize the seating arrangement for the head table. You mentioned specific requirements for family placement?" Amanda glanced quickly in my direction, then lowered her voice. "David's mother should be seated at table 6, she said quietly. Close enough to feel included, but positioned so she won't accidentally interrupt any important conversations. You know how some people can get confused about protocol in formal situations. Table 6. Far enough away to require a map to find David if I needed to talk to him." The catering manager nodded professionally. "And the blessing speech you mentioned? Keep it short and general. Something about love and family, but nothing too personal. We want to maintain the elegant tone of the reception." Elegant tone. Code for, don't let Margaret's obvious lack of sophistication contaminate the carefully curated atmosphere. That's when I learned what her speech would really contain. The revelation came during the cocktail hour, when I overheard Amanda rehearsing her reception speech with her maid of honor in the bridal suite. I want to thank everyone who made this day possible, especially the family members who've learned to support from their appropriate place. Some people understand that love means knowing your role and staying in it. Her maid of honor laughed. "That's perfect. Gracious but clear about boundaries." Amanda continued, her voice taking on the saccharine tone she used when delivering insults wrapped in kindness. "Some family members might think they deserve more attention, but true class means knowing when you're meant to be in the background. David's learned to appreciate that kind of wisdom. David's learned. Past tense. As if my son's ability to marginalize his own mother was an achievement worthy of celebration. I had 30 minutes to decide how to respond. Standing in that elegant bathroom with its marble countertops, I stared at my reflection and saw something I hadn't expected. Not the modest, intimidated widow that Amanda expected to see. I saw a woman who'd spent 40 years building and managing wealth, who'd navigated complex business relationships, who'd raised a successful son largely on her own. The metallic taste of suppressed rage coated my tongue. My vision seemed to sharpen, focusing on details with surgical precision. But underneath the anger, something else was taking shape. A cold, strategic calm that I recognized from my most challenging business negotiations. Amanda was about to learn that some people know exactly how to be elegant when the situation calls for it. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling to the account summary that showed my current balance, $83,427,612. Then I made a phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Patterson," I said when the country club manager answered. "This is Margaret Chen. I need to discuss a small matter regarding tonight's reception. What happened next would change our family forever." 20 minutes later, I rejoined the pre-ceremony gathering with a sense of purpose that made my steps feel lighter. Amanda was holding court near the flower arrangements, regaling her bridesmaids with honeymoon stories. David appeared at my elbow, looking handsome and nervous in his rented tuxedo. "Mom, are you okay?" "You seem different." "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking about how proud your father would be to see you so happy." David's face softened with genuine emotion. "I wish he could be here." "He is here," I said, touching his cheek gently, "in all the best parts of who you've become." The ceremony itself was flawless. Amanda floated down the aisle like something from a fairy tale. David's face glowed with happiness. The minister delivered eloquent remarks about love and commitment. I sat in the third row, exactly where I'd been assigned, watching my son promise to love and honor a woman who saw me as an embarrassment to be managed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the assembled guests erupted in applause and celebration. I applauded with genuine enthusiasm. Because despite everything, this was still my son's wedding day, and he deserved to have this moment of pure happiness before reality set in. The reception began with cocktails, dancing, and the endless round of congratulations. I mingled appropriately, accepted compliments on my son's choice of bride, and played my assigned role perfectly. But when Amanda approached the microphone for her speech, I felt that familiar cold clarity settle over me like armor. This was the moment I'd been preparing for since that conversation in the restaurant bathroom. The moment when Amanda would reveal exactly who she was, and David would finally have to choose between enabling her cruelty and protecting his mother's dignity. Amanda's speech began exactly as I'd expected. Perfect posture, practiced smile, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been challenged in public. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for celebrating this incredible day with David and me." Her voice carried across the ballroom with trained precision. The crowd settled into attentive silence, champagne glasses paused halfway to lips, all eyes focused on the radiant new wife. "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible, especially the family members who've learned to support from their appropriate place." There it was, the first knife, delivered with surgical precision wrapped in gratitude. Some people understand that love means knowing your role and staying in it. David and I are so grateful for everyone who's chosen to honor our vision rather than impose their own ideas. My phone call changed everything about tonight. The heat that flooded my face felt like opening an oven door. Every head in that ballroom seemed to turn toward me in slow motion. My throat constricted, making swallowing impossible, while whispers started rippling through the crowd. But underneath the humiliation, something surgical and precise took over. 40 years of managing difficult people had taught me to recognize this exact moment, when someone reveals exactly who they are and hands you the power to respond. Amanda continued building to the crescendo I'd overheard her rehearsing. True class means knowing when you're meant to be in the background. Some family members have learned this wisdom, and we're grateful for their understanding. The pause before understanding was deliberate, calculated to let everyone know exactly which family member she meant. That's when I stood up. The scraping of my chair against the marble floor cut through Amanda's words like a record scratch. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the servers froze in place, sensing something unscripted was about to happen. Amanda faltered for the first time all evening, her perfectly rehearsed speech thrown off by my unexpected movement. "Amanda, darling," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I appreciate your concern about my understanding of appropriate roles." I pulled out my phone with deliberate slowness, opening the banking app I'd prepared earlier. Perhaps this is a good time to clarify a few things about family dynamics and appropriate places. The club manager's recognition revealed what Amanda didn't know. Before Amanda could respond, Mr. Patterson approached our table with the kind of deference that made several guests look up with interest. "Mrs. Chen," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "I wanted to personally thank you for your generous support of our renovation project. The new wine cellar you helped fund has been a wonderful addition." Amanda's face went through a fascinating progression of emotions: confusion, curiosity, and then something that looked suspiciously like dawning horror. "Of course," Mr. Patterson continued. "We've missed seeing you at the investment club meetings. Will you be resuming your attendance now that the wedding festivities are complete?" Investment club. The words hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. I smiled graciously. "I'll certainly consider it, though I've been quite busy managing some recent portfolio adjustments." As Mr. Patterson retreated, I could see Amanda's mind working frantically, trying to process information that didn't fit the narrative she'd constructed about David's poor, simple mother. I had the evidence I needed to expose her completely. But I wasn't finished yet. Because Amanda's education needed to be thorough, and David's awakening needed to be complete, I turned back to face the crowd, my phone still in my hand, the banking app still displaying numbers that would recontextualize everything Amanda had just said. "I want to share something with all of you," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Amanda's right that family means understanding your appropriate role. For the past 6 months, I've been playing the role she assigned me, the modest widow who should be grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion she received." The ballroom was so quiet I could hear ice melting in abandoned drinks. But tonight seems like the perfect time to clarify what my actual role has been in this family and in this community. I held up my phone, angling it so the nearby tables could see the screen. The $80 million inheritance Amanda mentioned in her speech? It's been earning quite well this year. The number on the screen was clear enough for the first few rows to read: $83,427,612. The sound that went through the crowd was like a collective intake of breath. Champagne glasses clinked as hands trembled. Someone dropped silverware. Amanda's speech was about to become her worst nightmare. The country club membership Amanda was so proud of helping David join? I've been a founding member for 15 years. I helped design the investment strategy that funded this beautiful ballroom renovation. Amanda's face had gone completely white. Her carefully styled hair and professional makeup now looked like a mask that was slowly slipping off. The charity work she mentioned that would elevate our family's social standing? I've been quietly funding 3 local organizations for over a decade, including the literacy program that provides books to underprivileged children. David's face was cycling through every emotion possible: confusion, shock, embarrassment, and something that looked like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in months. What I planned next would shock even me. "Amanda," I said, turning to address her directly. "You've spent the past 6 months training my son to see me as someone who needed to be managed rather than respected. You've positioned yourself as the sophisticated one who understands how things work in the real world." My voice was getting stronger, more confident, carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades making decisions that affected millions of dollars. "But here's what you never bothered to learn about the real world. Wealth whispers, Amanda. Class doesn't announce itself. And true sophistication means treating people with dignity regardless of what you think they can do for you." The crowd's reaction exceeded my expectations. The applause started slowly, just a few people at first, then building like a wave across the ballroom. This wasn't polite applause of wedding guests. This was the kind of applause that comes when people witness justice being served. Mrs. Patterson from the investment club was actually standing. Several other country club members were nodding approvingly. Even some of Amanda's own friends looked uncomfortable. But the most important reaction was David's. My son was staring at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child, and I'd surprised him by knowing something he thought was beyond my understanding. Wonder, respect, and shame were all fighting for control of his features. "Mom," he whispered, though in the silence his voice carried. "I had no idea." "I know you didn't, sweetheart. And that's exactly the problem." I turned back to Amanda, who was still standing at the microphone, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Amanda, darling, you wanted everyone to understand appropriate roles and proper places. So let me clarify something for you." I walked closer to the head table, my sensible heels clicking on the marble floor with newfound authority. "My appropriate role is as the mother who raised the man you married. My proper place is wherever I choose to be, including at this club that I helped build, in this community where I've been contributing for decades, and in my son's life for as long as he wants me there. Your appropriate role is as David's wife, which means treating his family with the same respect you expect for your own. Your proper place is learning to be part of this family instead of trying to redesign it to suit your convenience." Amanda's next words would seal her fate. The silence that followed David's declaration felt like the moment between lightning and thunder. You know the impact is coming, but the waiting makes it more powerful. Amanda stood frozen at the microphone, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like genuine panic. For the first time since I'd met her, she appeared to have no script, no practiced response, no way to manipulate the situation back under her control. The crowd's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Heads turned toward each other in whispered conversations. The wedding photographer slowly lowered his camera as if sensing that some moments shouldn't be documented. But the most important reaction was David's. My son was looking at Amanda with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of cold evaluation that suggested he was seeing his new wife clearly for the first time. "Amanda," he said again, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "I need you to apologize to my mother. Right now." The request wasn't angry or emotional. It was the kind of calm ultimatum that comes when someone has reached the end of their patience and discovered they have boundaries they didn't know existed. Amanda's response revealed everything about her character that months of manipulation had hidden. "I will not apologize for defending our marriage against someone who's trying to upstage our wedding day," she said, her voice shaking with humiliation and defiance. "Your mother has been inappropriate all evening, and I won't pretend otherwise just to spare her feelings." The gasps from the crowd were audible this time. Several of Amanda's own relatives looked mortified. Her mother actually covered her face with her hands, because Amanda had just made the critical error that reveals someone's true character under pressure. Instead of acknowledging her mistake or showing grace under fire, she'd chosen to attack while cornered. David's face went through one final transformation, and I watched my son make the choice that would define his marriage. "Amanda," he said quietly, "if you can't show respect for my mother, then you can't expect respect from me." The words hit the ballroom like a physical force. This wasn't just a disagreement between newlyweds. This was a public declaration that David was choosing family loyalty over marital harmony. "You're going to side with her over me?" Amanda's voice rose to a pitch that carried to every corner of the room. "On our wedding day? After everything I've done to make this perfect?" Perfect. The word landed with bitter irony in a ballroom where the bride was publicly humiliating her new mother-in-law while her husband defended his family's dignity. David stepped away from the head table and walked over to where I was standing. The gesture was simple, but unmistakable. He was literally choosing sides in front of 200 wedding guests. "Mom, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have stood up for you months ago. I should have seen what was happening and stopped it." The crowd reaction exceeded my expectations. The applause started again, but this time it was different. Slower, more thoughtful, the kind of recognition that comes when people witness someone doing the right thing under difficult circumstances. Several guests were actually standing now, including most of the country club members who knew me personally. Mrs. Patterson approached our small group, her face flushed with righteous indignation. "Margaret, dear," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, I want you to know how appalled I am by what just happened. Your contributions to this community have been extraordinary, and you've always conducted yourself with perfect grace." She turned to look at Amanda with cutting politeness. Some people clearly don't understand that breeding shows most clearly under pressure. Other club members began approaching, offering their own support and making their disapproval of Amanda's behavior unmistakably clear. Each interaction reinforced the same message. Amanda had committed social suicide in front of exactly the audience whose approval she'd been desperately seeking. But the real justice was still unfolding. David was now discovering that the shame belonged to someone else entirely. "Amanda," he said, walking back toward the head table, "we need to talk. Privately." But Amanda was beyond rational conversation. The carefully constructed persona she'd maintained for months was completely gone, replaced by someone desperate and cornered. "Don't you dare walk away from me," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "This is our wedding reception. These are our guests. You don't get to humiliate me in front of everyone just because your mother can't handle being put in her place. Her place. Even in the middle of her own social destruction, Amanda couldn't stop revealing exactly what she thought of me." David looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face, and I saw something final settle in his expression. "Amanda, my mother's place is wherever she chooses it to be. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you don't understand what it means to be part of this family." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a disagreement that would be resolved with private conversation. This was a fundamental incompatibility that had been exposed for everyone to see. Amanda seemed to realize it too, because her next words came out in a rush of panic and fury. "Fine, choose her over me. But don't expect me to pretend this marriage means anything if you're going to let her control our decisions. Control our decisions." The projection was so complete that several people nearby actually laughed in shocked disbelief. Amanda's true motivations exposed. But the evening wasn't over yet. Mr. Patterson reappeared at our group, this time with several other club staff members. "Mrs. Chen," he said formally. "Given the circumstances, we wanted to discuss the remainder of the evening's arrangements." He turned to Amanda with professional courtesy that barely concealed complete disapproval. "Mrs. Whitfield, we understand that emotions are running high. However, we do have standards of conduct for events hosted at our facility." What happened next shocked everyone. Amanda's response revealed the final layer of her character. Instead of apologizing, instead of trying to salvage the situation with grace, she chose to double down one final time. "I don't care about your standards," she snapped at Mr. Patterson. "This is my wedding reception, and I'll conduct it however I see fit." Mr. Patterson's response was swift and definitive. "I'm sorry, but we'll need to conclude this evening's festivities earlier than planned. Our staff will assist with gathering personal belongings, but we ask that all guests make arrangements to depart within the next hour." The wedding reception was being shut down. Not dramatically, but with the kind of firm politeness that made the message clear. Amanda's behavior had made her unwelcome at an institution where I was a valued member. The symbolic victory was complete, but the personal cost was devastating. Because watching David's face as he processed what was happening, his wedding reception ending in disaster, his new wife revealed as someone he didn't really know, his mother vindicated but at the cost of his special day, was heartbreaking. David walked over to me, his face pale but determined. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything, for not listening to you, for letting Amanda treat you that way, for making you feel like you had to prove your worth." The apology was genuine, heartfelt, and completely unnecessary. "Sweetheart," I said, touching his cheek gently, "you don't owe me an apology for falling in love. You owe yourself a promise to trust your instincts about people from now on. That's the hardest lesson I've learned about people," I continued. "Sometimes the people who demand the most respect are the least deserving of it. And sometimes the people who seem powerful are actually the most frightened." Amanda was still standing at the microphone, apparently frozen by the collapse of everything she'd worked to achieve. Your inner wisdom matters, I said, speaking to David but knowing others were listening. It tries to warn you about people who see you as useful rather than valuable. The difference is that useful people serve a purpose until they don't. Valuable people deserve respect simply because they exist. As the guests began filing out, some stopping to offer quiet words of support, I realized that this evening had taught everyone present something important about character, consequences, and the difference between class and money. Amanda had gotten everything she'd planned for, a public forum to establish her social dominance. She just hadn't expected that forum to work both ways. 6 months after the wedding that ended in a country club intervention, I was sitting in my favorite chair with my morning jasmine tea when David called with our weekly check-in. "How are things with you this week, Mom?" he asked, and I could hear genuine interest in his voice again, not the careful obligation that had characterized our conversations during the Amanda manipulation period. The difference was remarkable. David laughed easily again, asked real questions about my life, and shared details without careful editing. "I'm well, sweetheart. I had lunch with Mrs. Patterson yesterday, and we're planning a new literacy initiative for the community center. It felt good to talk about my projects without downplaying their scope. For months, I'd been minimizing my community involvement to avoid making Amanda feel inadequate by comparison. Now, I could discuss my work honestly. And how are things with Amanda?" I asked, because despite everything, I cared about my son's marriage. The pause that followed was thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. "Better," David said finally. "Therapy is helping. She's starting to understand how her behavior affected everyone, not just you. It's slow progress, but it's real progress." Amanda's transformation surprised everyone. The woman who emerged from the wreckage of that wedding reception was someone I'd never met before. Gone was the manipulative social climber who'd spent months systematically isolating me from my son. In her place was someone genuinely shocked by her own behavior and committed to understanding how she'd become someone she didn't recognize. The change hadn't happened overnight. For the first month after the wedding, Amanda had been defensive, angry, and convinced that I'd somehow orchestrated her public humiliation. But therapy, combined with honest conversations with her own family about her behavior, had gradually broken through the protective mechanisms she'd built around her actions. The breakthrough came when Amanda's mother finally found the courage to tell her daughter some difficult truths. "Amanda," she'd said during one particularly difficult family discussion, "I watched you systematically dismiss and marginalize that woman for months. What I saw at the reception was cruelty. That's not who I raised you to be." Having her own mother acknowledge the problem had forced Amanda to confront the reality that her behavior wasn't defensible as stress or misunderstanding. It was a pattern of choices that had revealed something ugly about her character. David's revelation changed how he saw relationships, but the more profound transformation had been David's. My son spent weeks after the wedding analyzing not just Amanda's behavior, but his own role in enabling it. "Mom, I keep thinking about how I let you be treated," he'd said during one of our difficult post-wedding conversations. "I knew something was wrong, but I convinced myself that you were being overly sensitive. I realized I was so desperate to make Amanda happy that I stopped paying attention to whether her happiness was coming at other people's expense. That's not the kind of husband I want to be, and it's definitely not the kind of son I want to be." The lesson went deeper than just family dynamics. Through couples therapy and individual reflection, David and Amanda were learning to recognize the difference between compromise and capitulation, between keeping peace and enabling harmful behavior. Amanda was discovering that her insecurity about social status had led her to treat people as obstacles or assets rather than individuals deserving respect. She was learning that real confidence comes from treating others well, not from positioning yourself above them. David was understanding that love sometimes means having difficult conversations rather than avoiding conflict. That protecting someone's feelings in the short term can enable behavior that damages relationships in the long term. The wedding taught us all something about the difference between charity and dignity. Looking back now, I could see that the entire experience had been a masterclass in human behavior under pressure. Amanda's systematic manipulation, David's well-intentioned enabling, my own strategic patience. All of it had revealed fundamental truths about how people treat each other when they think they have power. But more importantly, it had demonstrated that authentic relationships require mutual respect, not just mutual affection. Real wealth isn't about the money you have. It's about treating people with dignity regardless of what you think they can do for you. It's about recognizing that everyone has value beyond their utility to your goals. Amanda was still learning this lesson, but she was learning it. The woman who now called me every few weeks to check in, who asked genuine questions about my community work, who deferred to my experience and wisdom in family discussions. This was someone I could eventually build a relationship with. Your inner wisdom is always trying to protect you. During one of our recent family dinners, Amanda had asked me something that showed how much she'd grown. "Margaret, how did you know to wait instead of confronting me directly about my behavior?" Most people would have just told David their concerns and forced him to choose sides. "Experience taught me that you can't argue someone out of love," I'd explained. "You can only show them what love looks like when it's tested by pressure." David needed to see for himself whether you would treat his family with respect when you thought you had all the power. Amanda had nodded thoughtfully. "I failed that test completely. But failing a test isn't the end of the story," I'd reminded her. "It's just information about where you need to grow. What assumptions have you made about people that turned out completely wrong?" That question had become the foundation of our family's ongoing healing process. All of us had made assumptions about each other that had shaped our behavior in harmful ways. Amanda had assumed that my modest lifestyle meant I was intellectually and socially inferior. David had assumed that keeping peace meant avoiding difficult conversations. I had assumed that patience alone would be enough to preserve my relationship with David. All of us had been wrong in different ways, and all of us had paid prices for those assumptions. Maybe someone you dismissed surprised you, or someone you trusted disappointed you. Share your story below. Your inner wisdom might help someone else recognize hidden worth in themselves or others. Everyone carries stories about times when they misjudged people or were misjudged themselves. Everyone has experience with relationships that required renegotiation, trust that needed rebuilding, assumptions that needed challenging. Your experience matters, and real recognize real. The wedding reception that had ended in disaster had become, 6 months later, the foundation for relationships that were more honest, more respectful, and more sustainable than what we'd had before. Sometimes love means teaching rather than telling. Sometimes wisdom means patience rather than confrontation. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to choose who they want to be when they think no one important is watching. The morning light streaming through my apartment windows felt warmer these days. The jasmine tea tasted richer. And when David visited, which he did more often now, sometimes with Amanda and sometimes alone, his hugs felt like coming home instead of obligation fulfilled. Some victories don't come with fanfare or celebration. Sometimes the greatest triumph is simply the quiet satisfaction of knowing you refused to disappear when everyone around you was trying to make you invisible.